Hello and welcome friends, I am That Happy Viking and I would like to present to you my set review of Ikoria for Gentry. If you have no idea what Gentry is, check the description below this video for more information. In this episode, we will be looking at the green cards. First up we have Adventurous Impulse. It's a common sorcery for 1 mana. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is a really interesting card to play in either Ram decks or the Sultai control decks that are really focused on creatures. But often people find themselves cutting this in the later stages of the deck, so I don't expect to see many of them, but the people that do play them will generally enjoy them quite a bit. The Almighty Brushwag is a 1 mana common 1/1 creature with trample. For 4 mana it gets +3/+3. And while this might not seem very good, it does give you something to do in all stages of the game. It uses your mana early game. It allows you to attack into things that it has no business attacking into mid game, and it can be a pretty scary finisher in the late game. Now, if you're playing a mutate deck, Almighty Brushwag becomes a really interesting creature to use as a base to mutate on, because no matter which creature you put above, that ability, the 4 mana gets +3/+3, actually says this creature gets +3/+3. So a mono green mutate deck would probably like to have Almighty Brushwag available, because it won't have any lands that come into play tapped. It will have that 1-drop slot available to them where multicolor decks don't, and will most likely be very strongly focused on building a really scary big monster. And then having that trample on there already really increases the value of that creature. Outside of mono green mutates, you'll probably want to have more utility focused 2-drops, because that's just where your deck is going to sit better. I totally expect to lose to all mutated Almighty Brushwagged mono green players, and I'm probably going to try to build that deck myself as well. And it's going to feature the next card we have as well. That's the Auspicious Starix, a 5 mana uncommon creature with mutate 6. Whenever it mutates, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanents, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. Almost all cards are going to be permanents in that deck. That's just how it's going to roll in the Shire. And it's probably going to try and risk running Starix out here and there whenever the coast is clear. Yes, risking the double mutate, but also just getting that advantage straight up. Barrier Reach is a 3 mana uncommon instant that exiles up to 3 target enchantments and has cycling 2. I don't think this will ever see play unless Aura decks somehow become the best deck in the format, because it allows you to multi-fight them through all of their protection in a way that they're not equipped to deal with. That said, I don't think that A, they are that oppressive, and B, I don't think that's going to really help you more than just grinding out them the way it does now, enough to warrant an uncommon slot. Bristling Boar is a 4 mana common for 3, can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. We are going towards token decks, which would make this creature somewhat decent. However, just getting trample is most likely a better way to answer that and the boar isn't really adding anything else to the board. Got it, board. That is interesting enough to warrant its inclusion. Charge of the Forever Beast is a 3-mana uncommon sorcery that requires you to reveal a creature card as an additional cost and deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the revealed card's power. So this is a interpretation of a removal in green that allows it to kill planeswalkers, which is something that's very, very new to that color. Usually what we see is green adding on other colors to deal with this thing, but maybe that mono green mutate deck can use this to have some extra utility. I don't think we'll see it, but I do think some people will have will be very disappointedly staring at their planeswalker when they thought their planeswalker was safe from a green deck. Colossification is a 7-mana rare aura that when it enters the battlefield taps enchanted creature. An enchanted creature gets +20/+20. I have a hard time seeing this be relevant. Barring a bunch of really good setup. One of the setup cards we'll see is going to be further below. It's in this set. One of the interesting cards is the black-white reanimation spell that returns a creature and an aura from your graveyard to the battlefield. To get this out in a cheated way or reuse it. But I just think it requires a lot, probably too much setup to be relevant. As a streamer noted, what you can also do is play this on your opponent's creature just to tap them and get them out of the way of your attackers. I don't think it's going to happen. I'll try to make it happen and I'll fail, but it'll work 1 time out of 10 and it'll be hilarious. That's my assessment of the card. Essence Symbiote is a 2-mana common 2/2 that has an ability that says whenever a creature you control mutates, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and you gain 2 life. This is green's enabler for mutate decks, and it's a really good one at that. It pushes creatures out of burn range, it gains you life to compensate for the board state you've lost, and in generally falls really well in the mutate chain with a lot of the really good ones at 3 mana. So if you're playing mutate, I think you're playing this card. There's not that many non-green mutate bases that I see as being really good, but I might be mistaken. Don't sleep on the little Essence Symbiote, and if you can, kill it on sight would be my advice for everybody. Excavation Mole is a 3-mana common 3/3 creature with trample. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your battlefield. At 3 mana 3/3, that's a very decent size to fight. It has the 3 toughness problem, so it will die to all the good red removal spells. But at least it trades for it, and it forces them in most of the decks that play them. The self-mill also becomes interesting if you are playing that Golgari or Sultai reanimation strategy. And I've been really impressed with it so far in Limited. Not sure how well that will translate, but it's a thing. Exuberant Wolfbear is a 4-mana uncommon 4/4. Whenever it attacks, you may change the base power and toughness of target human you control to Exuberant Wolfbear's power and toughness until end of turn. So this turns an attacking of target human, not an attacking, just a human you control into 4/4. In of itself, that's not super exciting unless you have something that really works off that increased power. There's not that many effects we currently have that do that. So as just a very predictable combat boost, this isn't good enough to play. Fertilid is a 3 mana common 0/0 that enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it, and for 2 mana you may remove a counter and have target player search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle their library. In of itself, this is a good but slow way to get lands. Get extra lands out of your deck onto the battlefield and accelerate you. But as a 0/0 that gets +1/+1 counters, it's a super interesting base to mutate off, because the +1/+1, you put the mutate creature on top, it will have a power and toughness, and then it will still have the +1/+1 counters, so you can build a pretty big creature in this way. And then later on, if it does get outclassed, you still have the ability to just get extra lands from your deck. I do think this is going to get played, and I really like it. Flycatcher Giraffid is a 5 mana common 3/5 that may have vigilance or reach. I don't think this is playable or interesting whatsoever. Fully Grown is a 3 mana common instant that gives a creature +3/+3 and puts a trample counter on it. I think decks that want this effect will already have trampling creatures, and at 3 mana this gets to the point where it's overcosted for what it does. So I don't expect this to be that good. There is one exception, which we'll get to a bit later, that might want this, but even there I have my doubts. Gemrazor is a 4 mana rare 4/4 creature that has mutate 3. It has reach and trample, and whenever it mutates, it destroys an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. That's a really strong base to mutate off of. It's an interesting ability. When it mutates, reach and trample are the interesting things you want to get on your bigger creatures, but is it enough? If your opponent just straight up has the removal spell, you pretty much fall to this. It's really good against cat oven decks though, which might push it into the realm of being played, especially in a mono-green mutate deck. Other than that, I don't really see a home for it. Glowstone Recluse is a 3 mana uncommon 2/3 with mutate 4. It has reach, and whenever it mutates, you put 2+1/+1 counters on it. This is the sort of the reverse of most other mutate creatures, where it will it costs more, but you're getting way more for it. And it makes it really interesting in, again, that mono green mutate deck, because if you draw this early game, you play it as a 3-drop, and it will still get those 2+1/+1 counters once you mutate something else onto it. If you get it late, you get to upgrade pretty much any of the creatures you have, because either that 2/3 is going to be bigger, or it's going to put 2+1/+1 counters on it for the price of 4 mana. Nothing crazy, but pretty solid nonetheless. Something that will be in your starting 60 while building the deck, but I might see not making the final deck. Raider Sandworm is a 7 mana common 7/7 that can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and it has cycling 2. There's multiple things you can do with this card. It's as a common, it's one of the best finishers you can get in a ramp deck. The fact that it gives you the option to cycle puts it in a possibly playable slot for some of the bigger other decks, gives you flexibility. And I do expect to see it as a 2 to 3 off in big mana decks. Honey Mammoth is a 6 mana, 6/6 common. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. This is lacking all the things that make Greater Sandworm so good. It doesn't have any evasion, doesn't have trample, and it doesn't offer anything early game. I don't think this is playable whatsoever. Hornbash Mentor is a 3 mana uncommon 3/3 creature. When it enters the battlefield, it puts a trample counter on target non-human creature you control, and for 3 mana you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with trample. This is the creature that I mentioned that might make the pump spell that gives a trample counter better, but it's just straight up better in a deck that already has predominantly creatures with trample. It's also one of the mentors that is most impressive on its own as a 3 mana 3/3, and can stay back and pump his bigger buddies. He's interesting on turn 3 as a 3/3 buddy. He's still relevant on turn 6 when there's already a bunch of creatures ready to get some +1/+1 counters, but the effect is slow. So I'm not sure if these decks will want to take the time to use it. If they do though, I think this is, together with the blue one of the better mentors in the format. Humble Naturalist is a 2 mana common 1/3 creature that you can tap for 1 mana of any color, but you can spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. It's definitely interesting, and in creature focus diverse, like color diverse decks, it's going to be really strong, but the fact you can only use it to cast creatures does make it pretty awkward. It is the best tool you have for a 5-color green explosive deck though, so I do expect to see this, because the 1/3 body also makes it very relevant early game against aggressive decks. Ivy Elemental is a X and green uncommon creature that enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters, which is really good because it starts at 0 and it would die if it doesn't get counters. This is interesting in bigger green mutate decks for the same reason that Fertilite is interesting. It has +1/+1 counters, so that makes it a super interesting base to mutate onto, because those +1/+1 counters will add on to whatever power and toughness the creature has that you use to mutate the Ivy Elemental. That said, I don't really see a scenario where it's really better than Fertilite, considering Fertilite is a common and will also be a 3 mana 2/2, which this card probably most of the time will want to be just to fit into the curve correctly. It does give you the option of playing it as a 1/1 on turn 2, or playing it as a way bigger creature later on in the game, so it's a better top deck in that regard. But I'm not sure if that is good enough for it to take one of your uncommon slots. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. That flexibility is pretty relevant, and mono green has some tools even in the mutate deck that really allow it to ramp, so it could definitely happen that it gets 2 or 3 of my uncommon slots. Kogla the Titan Ape is a 3 mana rare 7/6. When it enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control, and when it attacks, it destroys an artifact or enchantment a defending creature controls. For 2 mana, of which 1 green, you get to return a human you control to owner's hand and give your Titan Ape indestructible. This is both removal because it fights, and utility because it destroys artifacts or enchantments in a really nicely sized creature with a near irrelevant, well, not near irrelevant, but less irrelevant ability that gives it indestructible. If you're mono green, I wouldn't be surprised to see you playing this together with the 4/4 rare mutate. This gives you another free destroy artifact or enchantment effect, in your deck, and that is pretty strong. Outside of mono green, there's probably better options for you. Lead the Stampede is a 3 mana uncommon sorcery. You get to look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal any number of creature cards from them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So again, that mono green mutate deck might want this. Outside of that, I don't see many decks that might want that. There might be a somewhat combo-oriented creature-heavy deck that can use it, but other than that, it's going to be rather disappointing. Migration Path is a 4 mana uncommon sorcery. Searches your library for up to 2 basic land cards, puts them onto the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle your library. Also has cycling 2. At 4 mana, I probably don't want to be accelerating anymore, or use up one of my uncommon slots. So while good and amazing in Commander, for example, I don't think this will be played too much in Gentry. Migratory Greathorn is a 4 mana 3/4 common creature with mutate 3. Whenever this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. While not super impressive, this lies very nicely in your curve in that mono green deck. It also allows you to fix your colors. So a 5-color green, like splashing a bunch of really interesting cards, becomes possible here. I think it will be played in both versions, and it's going to surprise a bunch of people what it enables. Monstrous Step is a 5 mana uncommon sorcery that gives a creature +7/+7, and up to 1 other target creature blocks it this turn if able. Also has cycling 2 in case you don't need it. Again, giving green the ability to kill a creature pretty much. In the trample oriented deck, this is really good. In other decks, it's moderately good. I do expect to see it here and there, and it will finish a lot of games in Gentry. Moscow Goriak is a 3 mana 2/4 vigilance, which pretty much is only interesting to sideboard in against very aggressive decks, but there you have better options. I don't think it's going to be played. Mythics of Brio is a 4 mana rare sorcery. If you spend red and black to cast this spell, you search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Return up to 2 permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. So you return 2, and if you played black and red, you first put something in your graveyard. I already mentioned the Sultai and or Golgari graveyard interaction decks. So I do think that this card might slot in there, but in the end it's just a bunch of recursion. Well, it's recursion plus tutor, but usually you want to go get your rares rather than use your rares. So might be good, but I'm not sure. Plummet is a reprint and is a super solid sideboard card that we often see in decks that don't have other answers to it. However, they are getting new answers, of which we have Ram Through, probably one of the more important cards in green in this set for Gentry. At 2 mana common instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. If the creature you control has trample, excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. So not only is this instant speed, it isn't a fight spell, so you don't risk losing your own creature, but if you have that big pummeler, it also just punches through damage, so it makes it direct damage in a way to the player in green as well. And I think this card might push those green trample decks to the forefront. It'll be enough to make people consider having that trample focus and push some of the other cards that are somewhat mediocre over the top just to enable this card as much as possible. For sure, I think that the ramp decks should be focusing more on getting trample incorporated in their deck just to enable this. Sudden Spinnerets is a 1 mana instant that gives a creature +1/+3. It puts a reach counter on them and it untaps them. Beyond being a somewhat underwhelming sideboard card, I don't really expect this to be played. Just plummeting is better, even though this does also give protection against burn spells. So it's more flexible than pummel, but sort of hopes to achieve the same effect. I think I'd rather have pummel. Survivor's Bond is a 2 mana common sorcery that lets you choose one or both, return a human or a non-human card from the graveyard to your hand. If that Sultai graveyard interaction deck is going to be a thing, then this will be played in it. Not that many, once or twice, but still. Or the enemy has a 3 mana common instant that prevents all damage that will be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So this is a fog that does let you hit back. That's a pretty important distinction. It costs 1 mana more, but it allows for a pretty strong blowout. Currently, the only decks that are playing fog effects, though, are the ones that just try to extend the game and don't really have creatures of their own, so they don't care about this effect. Other decks that might want to use this will put it in the sideboard as a surprise, but I don't think people will really get the advantage they want out of this. Titanoth Rex is a 9 mana uncommon 11/11 creature with trample that you can cycle to put a trample counter on target creature you control. Easy to say that if you are playing that Trample Matters deck, that Titanoth Rex is probably going to be featured in it if you are focusing on the heavy ramp side of the strategy. If you're more on the mid-range, I don't think this is actually worth it, and you're better off playing the pump spell that puts a trample counter as well. Then we have Vivienne, a 5 mana unique planeswalker that allows you to look at the top card of your library at any time. Also allows you to cast creature spells from the top of your library, and you can +1 to create a 3/3 beast token. You get to put Vigilance, Reach, or Trample on it. And for -2, whenever you cast your next creature spell this turn, search your library for a creature with lesser converted mana cost, put it into the battlefield, and shuffle your library. Is insanely strong. Getting this out is your card draw engine, your trample enabler, and your utility searcher in all in one package. If you're playing heavy green, creatures, you are going to be playing this. Then last in the green cards we have Wilt, a 2 mana common instant. It destroys target artifact or enchantment and has cycling. This competes with Return to Nature for the slot in the sideboard, and if exiling things from the graveyard becomes less important, it's a straight up upgrade. For now, I think I want to stick with my Return to Nature because it still has some utility left in it. And that wraps up the green creatures, green cards, sorry, and really shows us that there is a green ramp theme that's available, but also a green Trample Matters theme. These don't need to be mutually exclusive. You can ramp into tramplers, of course, but I think some of our ramp happy players will be really happy with what this set offers their decks. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and check out the other videos in this set review.